The MSI Claw launched earlier this year, and it missed the mark. Not only was it more expensive than the competition that was out there, we're talking about the Legion Go as well as the ROG Ally at the time, but it also performed worse, which made it much more difficult to sell. Now, just 9 months after MSI's first foray in the PC handheld space, they are launching the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus. And with this new handheld up to bat, is this a home run, or will this be strike two for MSI? And will I continue these baseball analogies throughout the video? A little tiny bit of context before we get into things. First and foremost, I was part of an MSI event earlier this month where MSI flew myself as well as a couple of other content creators to check out their Claw 8 AI Plus and talk to the engineers and the staff that was there about their handheld, what was good about it, what was bad about it, and why they chose the direction that they went. Also, this is a loaner unit. There was no money exchange or anything like that between MSI and us. All reviews or all points in this review are my own, and they aren't seeing this video before it goes live. Now, I do want to say that when I did get this unit, it was already opened, it was already set up with Windows, and there wasn't any sort of PIN or password that needed to be put in. It just turned on and boom, it was set and ready to go. Also, there were drivers that needed to be updated on this handheld, and even though I was getting everything updated, it didn't update to the latest firmware until yesterday. And as of right now, today's 12/26, so yesterday was Christmas. And oh, by the way, I got this on Christmas Eve, so I didn't really get to mess too much with this handheld per se. And now that it's the 26th, I've spent all day pretty much testing and making sure that everything was up to par for this handheld. If you didn't watch my Claw 8 AI Plus impressions from Anaheim, I wanted to let you know that I took a microSD card with me in order to play games that weren't already on their pre-approved list on those units. Now, they were okay with me actually testing those games out, but because of the Wi-Fi, there were just issues downloading stuff. I digress. At the end of the day, I could only test out 2 games. One was Black Myth Wukong, and the other one was Horizon Forbidden West, the complete edition. Both of those games did not run well at all. And those were 2 of the first games that I actually tried on this unit that I have on my hands right now. Both actually performed horribly. They could barely hit 30 FPS. It wasn't until late last night that I got a driver update notification, and that's when it finally clicked in. Once that driver update was installed, I saw a 50 to 80% performance boost on all of the games that I had installed on this handheld, regardless of whether or not it was favoring Intel versus AMD. Everything just got a significant boost in performance. Now, when it comes to the specs, there are a lot of things that are exciting, but the biggest things for me that stood out are the Intel Core Ultra 258V, the 32 gigabytes of RAM, all paired up with an 80 watt-hour battery, which means that you're going to be playing for a long period of time. All of this is wrapped in a body that weighs just at 800 grams. Now, all of that being said and done, the biggest thing that I noticed when I started playing on this handheld, aside from the ergonomics, which I'll get into it a little bit, is the screen. The screen is absolutely immaculate. Like, this is almost up there with the Legion Go in terms of vibrancy and color accuracy. You're talking about an 8-inch 1200p VRR LCD screen. Now, that VRR definitely helps out when you're playing games that don't hit that 60 FPS mark, which we'll talk about that later on. But at the end of the day, I know that a lot of people prefer OLED, and that's kind of where we want the direction to go. But VRR support is something that is a make or break for a lot of people. Me personally, as I'm playing games on more and more handhelds, I do notice the VRR kicking in and helping out when it comes to playing games on these handhelds. Let's do a quick tour of this handheld. Now, when you're looking at the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus, it's actually very similar to the original one in terms of like placements and where the buttons are and how things feel. It's pretty much almost exactly the same, except for a couple of things. Now, first and foremost, the actual shoulder buttons are much more clickier, if that makes sense, on the 8 AI Plus. So if you want to have something that is much more responsive and less mushy, then you would want to go for something like this. But in that same vein, if you're looking at the actual triggers, one is much smaller than the other one. And I compared this specifically when I was talking to Russ from Retro Game Core, because when I'm pushing down on the actual triggers, I'm pushing it down with my my joint and not my actual the meat of my index finger. So it feels weird. Now, for Russ from Retro Game Core, he said it was fine, it was perfect, and it felt comfortable. But for me, it feels off. I don't know. I wish that they had gone more with this style that's a little tiny bit thicker and a little bit bigger, so you have much more space to be able to, you know, pull down that trigger. And I'm kind of, you know, even like holding this right now, you can kind of feel that it's a little bit too small, but maybe I just have big hands. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it just doesn't feel comfortable to go ahead and use. Now, everything else that is here for this handheld feels just as it should. The analog sticks are a little loose, just how it was on the original, as well as the original Asus ROG Ally. The D-pad, if you've seen my video from Anaheim, from the MSI event, you know exactly how I feel about the D-pad. Now, in terms of what I don't like, let's just get this out of the way. That D-pad is not good. I'm not a fan of it. It's too hard, and if you're playing any sort of fighting games, anything that requires a quarter circle or a half circle, it's just not good. And after a few days, it feels exactly the same. Like when I was playing Guilty Gear Strive, trying to, you know, do quarter circles and half circles, it was just not comfortable at all. I would not recommend it if you're going to get this specifically for fighting games. I mean, look at the corners and edges on this D-pad. All it takes is a couple of matches doing quarter circles or half circles, and you'll see and understand why these sharp edges are so uncomfortable when you're playing on this D-pad. If you're going to be playing any sort of retro titles, if you're going to be doing any sort of emulation, then yeah, you'll be fine because the cardinal points are fine. Also, the input is very accurate. I rarely had any sort of misinputs when I was playing Guilty Gear Strive. It just performed as it should. But again, if you're playing a fighting game, like, you're probably going to want to switch this D-pad out for something else, which, side note, I wish companies would allow for stuff like that, but I digress. On top, you are going to have your power button that doubles as a fingerprint sensor. You also have a microSD card reader, 2 Thunderbolt 4 inputs, and then a 3.5mm port. And you also have a volume rocker. On the backside, you're going to have these macro keys, which are fine. They're comfortable. They're right where they should be. And you need just enough force to push them down to where you don't accidentally push them whenever you're playing games. But aside from that, everything feels just as it should. The face buttons, they're kind of clicky, just like an Xbox controller. And you also have these buttons for the M Center, as well as the Quick Settings menu that is right here, that is integrated right into Xbox Game Bar. That's so awesome. When they showed me this, I was so excited for it, because this is exactly the stuff that we want when it comes to integrating things naturally into Windows. All of the things that you would want, whether it's performance, Xbox achievements, your friends, if you want to download widgets, you have all this stuff here. It's super exciting because it makes it much more seamless when you're integrating things with the OS itself. It's awesome, and it's super exciting. One of the things that we can all agree on is that the original MSI Claw had one of the best speaker sets out of all of the PC handhelds that are out there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus is no slouch at all. It takes what was good in the original and just makes it even better. I mean, guys, have a listen. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Things are much more clear, regardless of whether or not it's at 100% volume capacity or just 25, 30%. Like, I never have to put it past 30% when I'm playing on the Claw 8 AI Plus. So yeah, if you're going for this just for like the auditory experience alone, like, you'll be set. It's almost like its own like haptic feedback whenever you're actually playing on the handheld and using the speakers. It's a beautiful experience. The heat dissipation and thermals on the 8 AI Plus are awesome, especially when you compare it to the original MSI Claw. Now, when we're looking at the Claw 8 AI Plus, there are some inspiration that MSI got from other PC handheld manufacturers to help distribute that air and keep not only the CPU and RAM and all of the other bits and pieces of the motherboard cool, but also the screen and the front of the motherboard. Now, regardless of the inspiration that's there, it does a good job. It keeps the handheld cool. You never have to worry about it feeling like it's overheating, and you rarely even notice it when you're playing games. And I feel like that's the main point of having really good thermals and heat dissipation, that it's so good that you never notice it when you're playing games in the first place anyways. Looking at MSI's Center M, this is MSI's front end that is used to kind of help make this more of a handheld experience. It's pretty awesome. There are some drawbacks that are here, some qualms that I personally have when it comes down to it. And these are things that we mentioned during the MSI event in Anaheim. Some things have changed since then, and it makes it feel like MSI is actually listening to the things that we're talking about. But so first and foremost, it'll automatically scan all of the games that are there in directories. Now, if by any chance there isn't anything that's there that you want, you can go into the game library and scan. It'll scan anything else that has been downloaded, or you can add a specific game, whatever it is that you want to go ahead and do. Now, if we're going in, you can change the game profile, which is essentially how it's presented on screen, and you can point to different game locations and things like that. Now, aside from that, if you were to push up, it will take you to this, which allows you to select any sort of launcher that you would want. I don't know why GOG isn't here, but you know, that's a whole different story entirely. The MSI app player is actually a way of playing Android games on here. It's kind of cool. I do like the fact that, you know, the options there, but I'm personally not a fan of that. So take that as you will. Now, the user scenario, this is kind of when we start talking about TDP and different modes that are here. Now, the overboost option that's here, I haven't noticed a huge difference when using this in contrast to not using it. The one thing is that when you do toggle this on or off, it is going to reset your unit. When it comes to the AI engine that's here, it does a pretty good job of just selecting the different TDP options that are down here and adjusting it for the game that you're going to be playing. Endurance pretty much takes that, but puts it more battery focused so that it can increase your battery life over a long period of time. And then manual mode allows you to pick and choose the different options that are here. Now, a couple of weeks ago when we went to the MSI event, there was no 8-watt option. And this was something that we mentioned, that we would want something that would allow for us to play at a low wattage mode if we're going to be playing like a 2D side scroller or a pixel art game, things like Animal Well, for instance. I would want to be able to use this option instead of 17 watts or 30 watts and kill my battery for no reason at all, because you're going to have all of this power that's being consumed with no real purpose behind it. So I do like the fact that they gave us options of 8 watt, 17 watt, and 30 watt. The one thing that I do wish was here was kind of like a slider or something to let me pick, you know, 15 watts or 7 watts or 10 watts, something that is in between these that would allow for much more control over the games that I'm going to be playing. For example, when I was flying with my Asus ROG Ally X over the summer, I could toggle everything down to 10 watts while playing pixel art games. And because of that, I was able to extend my battery life and play pretty much my entire flight from Europe to the United States. Now, when we go to fan speed, auto does a pretty good job, but if you want to go in and actually go into advanced, you can toggle the different options that are here and apply it. There's also a default option that's there if you mess stuff up and you want to go back and go to fix that. Control mode pretty much splits everything into customizing the gamepad mode as well as the desktop mode. It's pretty straightforward when it comes down to it in terms of what it is that you want to go ahead and do. One thing that I do like about this, though, that I want to go ahead and mention, and this is something that a lot of people talked about, was the gyro behavior. So if you want to, you can change the gyro behavior that's here. And if you want it to be a left stick or a right stick or a mouse, you can change that within the MSI Center M. And then if you scroll down, there's different options that are here about whether or not to have it always on, different ways that you can toggle on gyro if you want to. So it's pretty cool. I do want to go ahead and also mention that the combinations for the M buttons are here as well. So if you want to do different shortcuts for different things without having to go back into the Center M app, then you have that option there, which is pretty cool. I like overall the customization and options that are here. You don't have to go too deep into it. Desktop mode, it kind of, does the same thing, just more about using the actual controller as a desktop. And then on top of that, I do want to let you know that the macro keys are, at least the way that I got it, there was no preset at all in terms of how these are set up. So if you want to customize how they're used, then you can actually create a macro and record what it is that you're pressing. It's super cool. I like the functionality that's there, because if you have like a custom button combination that you want to use to bring up a specific window or whatever it is that you're going to be using this for, then you can do that and actually customize it. Vibration, if you want to change the intensity, it's there. Triggers, again, with the distance that's traveled before it actually like feels anything, is there. Dead zone adjustments is there, and different key maps are there as well. Now, when it comes to news and updates, it's pretty straightforward. You have your news updates, which, by the way, I was running into a quick issue with this. I don't know if it's been fixed since all of the updates that I've gotten. No, it hasn't. So the Intel NPU driver doesn't update, and the Godix fingerprint driver doesn't update. But if I click A and I start updating it, it'll initiate it, and then a whole list of different things to update pop up. Like so. So it hasn't been updated, it hasn't been fixed. And then when I go through to update all of these, none of them actually update. So I don't really know what's going on with that. If we go back into the MSI update area, there's also the MSI forums as well, if you wanted to get into that and you wanted to see what's going on. Connection's pretty straightforward for connection to Wi-Fi as well as Bluetooth. And when it comes to different settings, you have this AI engine that's here. I toggled it off just so that I could get 30-watt performance and 17-watt performance, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But if you want to, you can turn this on, and you can let the AI control two different things, one being the performance as well as the lights being the RGB lights that are here. And if you go into the option settings, this pretty much asks what it or where you want it to go ahead and run. Now, one of the things that I wanted to go ahead and mention is that if you do have AI engine turned on, and you also have the light option that's there, this Mystic light, which controls all of the RGBs that are here, are going to clash with it. So you want to be pretty much cognizant of what it is that you want to go in and do with that. There's noise cancellation here for both the speakers as well as the microphones that are right here on the sides. Media gallery is straightforward. That's for, seeing media that you capture, whether it's video or photo. Then there's a system info, which is essentially my computer for this unit. Service for getting service. And then general settings. This is cool because, like, if you by any chance mess something up, you can reset the entire MSI Center M settings that are here. So if something breaks for whatever reason and you want to reset it, you can do so relatively easily. Now, I love everything that's here because it makes it very seamless and easy to use, especially after the latest update that I got on this unit. When I first got it, there were issues where I would push the MSI Center M button and things just wouldn't pop up. It would just constantly, lag, or there were problems that arose. But when it comes down to it, now it's fine. So I'm assuming that this is the same driver that if you were to buy it today and get it in your hands, this is how you would experience things. But before this, a few days ago, it was not nice at all, and I do not recommend it when it came down to it. One of the coolest things that I like about the Center M experience is that the quick settings menu is baked right into the Xbox game bar. Like, guys, this is absolutely awesome, especially for somebody that plays games on Xbox Game Pass. Like, if you were to go ahead and go up, all of the recent titles that are here that you've played are right there ready to launch. And then you also have all of the different launchers that are here. But if we were to go to the right, you have Xbox Social, you have all of your audio, you have your capture, real world performance. Then you also have Xbox achievements. There's a widget store that's there. You have different settings, and you can access all of this right here. Boom, right there, straight from the get-go. I love the fact that it is baked in right into the Xbox game bar, because that means that it just integrates naturally with what Windows has provided and what Microsoft has provided. Now, when it comes to the MSI Quick Settings menu, it's pretty straightforward. Like, I did have some bugs pop up when I was trying to change the brightness that was here. Like, I actually had to go into the Windows settings in order to actually get this to adjust and save properly. Now it's fine. Everything works as it should, especially after that last driver update that we got. But one of the things that I wanted to go and mention is that if you have all of these, they're all full, all of the different tiles that are here. But if you wanted to change them, all you got to do is go into settings, and then all these little X's pop up. Now, let's say I wanted to, like, I don't screen record any of like my gameplay most of the time, but I wanted to switch it out to, let's say I want to focus on resolution. All I got to do is hit A twice, boom, it is here. Now, if by any chance, you mess something up, or if you're like tired and everything's kind of just like messed up, you can hit the default button that's here and it'll revert back to the default. But if you hit apply, boom, it saves everything, and there's my resolution instead of my screen record. So having these options are honestly awesome. I like the fact that everything's baked into Xbox Game Bar. I hope that more OEMs do the same thing, because my opinion, or at least my thought process behind it, is that this is going to make the experience much more seamless whenever you're actually pulling up the quick settings menu, in contrast to having your own way of doing things. Having a front end is fine, because this is essentially making something nice and pretty instead of having to deal with windows and files, and managing and going through windows with a controller isn't the best experience in the world. But this is nice, and this is just taking that quick settings menu experience and elevating it with that natural integration into Windows. Before we start talking more about performance, I do want to go ahead and preface that performance was kind of all over the place, and I say this positively, not negatively. The reason why it was all over the place was because not all games support XeSS. XeSS isn't as widely adopted as FSR, and because of that, some of the games that do run XeSS but are more favored towards AMD, they just kind of don't really implement the technology that well, and even running FSR on this handheld just outperformed the XeSS equivalent. Now, when XeSS is running, and it's running well on a well-optimized game like Returnal, for instance, it is absolutely immaculate. It is beautiful what that technology can do, especially when you compare it to what would happen with FSR, because FSR has a lot of artifacting that happens depending on the level of quality versus performance that you go for. But at the end of the day, like when it comes down to it, if you have something that has XeSS and it's enabled well, it runs beautifully and it looks beautiful on this handheld as well. Now, the 4 games that I wanted to go in and test out were Black Myth Wukong, Horizon Zero Dawn, the Remastered Edition, Cyberpunk 2077, and Returnal. The reason why I threw Returnal in is because it's technically part of that XeSS enabled category that is on Intel's website. I really wanted to see what this could do using the technology that is baked into this handheld. Now, all of the games are going to be running at 1200p and on the low preset. And the interesting thing about the numbers that I got is that all of these games have benchmarking tools, by the way, and I ran those benchmarking tools, and they are in most cases very different than what I got through just playing the game and just capturing data. So bear that in mind as we go through all of these. First up, we have Black Myth Wukong, and the interesting thing about this is that using that built-in benchmarking tool, you could see that there's a difference in performance between XeSS and FSR. This was the only game that I did this on, by the way, but you could see that there was roughly around almost 20 frames per second at 30 watts, and at 17 watts, you could see that there was roughly around 10 frames. Now, in terms of a real-world experience and just playing the game outright, I was getting roughly around 50 frames per second. Every once in a while, it would dip down to the low to mid 30s, but for the most part, it stayed at that high 40 and low 50 FPS range. Regardless of that, it still ran relatively smooth thanks to that VRR that is built into the screen itself. Next up, we have Returnal, and once again, the reason why that game is there is because this is XeSS enabled according to Intel's website. So I wanted this to be kind of a best case scenario of having a game that is running on here and is optimized for the technology that is there. Now, while I was running benchmarks at 30 watts and using XeSS, I was getting 47 frames per second, 17 watts and XeSS, I was getting 35 frames per second. But while I was running the game, I was getting 50 to 55 frames on average, with a couple of dips here and there to the mid to low 40s. But regardless of that, it ran relatively smooth, and I really enjoyed my experience there. So if this is the best case scenario at 1200p, if you're running it at 800p, it's gonna perform well and much better than what I could hear. You're gonna hit 60 no problem at all. Throwing in Cyberpunk 2077 into the mix of things is simply because of the fact that MSI themselves really wanted to show this off at the MSI event. I really wanted to see what this could do, though, in a real-world scenario when it's not attached to a GPU like it was at the event. But regardless of that, using XeSS at 30 watts, I was getting roughly around 61 frames per second, and at 17 watts, again using XeSS, I was getting 45.2 frames per second. But in a real-world scenario, as I'm playing the game, not benchmarking it, I was getting roughly around 45 frames per second, with peak numbers being around 52 and those lows being around 38. That being said, the experience that I had with this handheld, again, was smoothed out because of that VRR on the screen. And finally, we have Horizon Zero Dawn, the remastered edition. This is actually one of my best friends, Onyx. It's his favorite game. He absolutely loves this game. So I really wanted to showcase it here. Now, when it comes to this game specifically, when I was using the built-in benchmarking tool at 30 watts using XeSS, I was getting roughly around 40 frames per second. And when I was using 17 watts performance with XeSS, I was getting 29 frames per second. But in a real world scenario, while playing the game, I was getting roughly around 42 frames per second with a couple of spikes all the way up to the mid 40s and a couple of dips to the high 30s. So overall, it was a pretty decent experience. And in terms of frame timing, it was actually better than I thought it was going to be on this handheld. All right, now that we know the performance that we can expect at 17 watts and 30 watts, let's talk about the different power profiles that are there and the battery life that you can expect with all of them. Now, in the Center M app, you can pick and choose between 8 watts, 17 watts, and 30 watts. At 8 watts, you're going to be looking at 8 hours and 55 minutes, just under 9 hours of battery life. Again, depending on whatever's happening on screen, but that's the average. And then at 17 watts, you're gonna get about 4 hours and 15 minutes of battery life. And then at 30 watts, you're gonna get around 2 hours and 25 minutes. Now, the cool thing with that is that you can pretty much pick and choose whatever TDP that you want. And most games were serviceable at 17 watts, which means that if you have a low preset and you're using 17 watts, you're going to be getting just over 4 hours of battery life while playing AAA titles. Now, I do take this with a grain of salt because different games, they just require different things and it's an average. One of the things that are a selling point with this handheld is their AI profile, which would go and look at the game that's there and adjust the TDP for whatever it is that you're playing and give you the best performance possible. One of the things that I did notice while going on to Twitter was Carrie, aka the Fox, saying that Celeste was running at a very high TDP of 13 watts, which is way more than what's necessary in order to run this game on this handheld. And lo and behold, I'm looking at it right now. It's 13.9 watts, 12.9 watts. It's kind of just like hovering and, you know, going within that 13 watt range. And it kind of sucks because in the past, I would say, well, if you want to play some titles, using that AI profile does the job. But in this instance, it seems like there are some wrinkles that need to be ironed out from MSI in order to get this up to par, because you don't need 13 watts to run Celeste. That's just overkill by all means. And again, looking at Carrie's tweet, he was able to get that down to 3 watts. By the way, Carrie, if I don't know if I'll put a link down to his channel and his Twitter in the description, but it was absolutely awesome that he was able to get it down to 3 watts. And this kind of brings up the point that I wish that there was a way to set up a custom TDP within the Center M app. Obviously, there are third-party solutions that you can find online in order to unlock that TDP and just be able to bring it down as much as possible while still being able to run the games that you want to go ahead and run, especially if you're talking about emulation as a whole, or even just playing pixel titles like Celeste or Dead Cells, or just games like that that don't really require that much horsepower. Balatro is another one. By the way, play Balatro. Balatro is absolutely fantastic, but I digress. At the end of the day, when it comes to the power profiles, as of right now, I do recommend going with the manual settings. Don't go with the Gen AI option or whatever the heck it's called, because at the end of the day, that AI profile is going to end up killing your battery much faster than you want, because it'll just pick any sort of random TDP in order to get your game running. Now, I really wanted to see how far I could push the hardware, and in order to do that, I decided to try out some ray tracing in combination with XeSS. And a couple of games that I tried out were Spider-Man Miles Morales, Tomb Raider, or well, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and then Cyberpunk 2077. Now, with Spider-Man Miles Morales, I was able to get roughly around 40 to 45 frames on average. This is with the very high setting preset alongside with using ray tracing at a high preset as well. I did want to go ahead and let you know that this is actually using the XeSS quality mode. I prefer to use quality mode whenever possible. I really don't like to go any lower than that. So here is how that looks. Now, when it comes to Shadow of the Tomb Raider, again, we're taking ray tracing, pushing it all the way to the maximum, as well as the preset for the graphical fidelity. Now, this is an older title, but at the end of the day, it still looks absolutely immaculate. And I was getting anywhere roughly around 50 to 60 frames on average. Again, this is just XESS and ray tracing. It's honestly magical. And finally, we have Cyberpunk 2077. Again, pushing it all the way to ray tracing ultra, not overload, because that would actually bring the system to a crawl at 15 frames per second. But when you combine ray tracing ultra with XESS auto, that's where the magic truly happens. Now, obviously, this isn't anything in comparison to a desktop PC or a high-end laptop. 30 frames per second with ray tracing isn't anything super crazy. But when you're talking about a handheld PC that can play ray tracing games at 30 FPS and it's high, we're talking about ultra ray tracing. It's absolutely mind-blowing, guys. And this is the beginning of what 2025 has to offer for all of us when it comes to the Windows-based PC handheld market. It's super exciting, and it gets me really, really excited for next year with seeing what we're at the pinnacle of. So the question now arises, should you get the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus, or rather, who is it for? Now, if I had unlimited funds and I could just buy whatever the heck, okay, all right. If I had unlimited funds and I could just buy whatever I wanted, I would probably go with the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus because it is the best handheld as of right now. And I leave a huge asterisk in terms of right now. CES is literally a few weeks away. There's rumors that Lenovo is going to announce their next handheld, and that handheld is going to include the Z2 Extreme chipset from AMD. And although this 8 AI Plus from MSI is outperforming the ROG Ally X and Legion Go and so on and so forth, we're talking about this outperforming tech that came out a year and a half ago. So is this too little too late? Or is this going to perform on par with the Z2 Extreme chipset that is going to be released, or at least announced soon? That's kind of the question that comes to mind. In terms of who is it for, that's really it. If you have unlimited funds, yeah, by all means, go for it. But if you are price conscious at $899, the MSI Claw 8 AI Plus is a hard sell. And I really do think that give it a few months, maybe, in Black Friday, this will be a contender that is definitely something to take into account. The MSI Claw A1M, the first one at that 400-ish price point, is definitely a deal. Now, I hope that this can get to that 600 price point, maybe 650, and then we can really talk about, that being much more competitive at that price point. But anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are you going to be getting this for yourself? Is this something that you're considering, or are you just kind of, cautiously optimistic? Are you going to wait until we see whatever is going to come out from Lenovo over at CES? Let me know down in the comments. I love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to hear my thoughts on the MSI Claw A1M after half a year, then click this video over here. And if you want to hear how I turned my ROG Ally X into a Steam Deck using Bazite, click this video over here. And until next time, guys, I will see you on the next one. Peace.